Hi again, folks. This is Mike then from rcgroups.com. As you guys know, I am reviewing the HBX 12889 thruster 2-speed off-road truck. I was charging the battery the other day because I wanted to go out and get some footage for my running video montage. And the battery, this little battery here with this little charger here, even though the thing charges at 800 milliamps, it takes forever to charge. So I ran out of time the other day. The battery was only about maybe 70-80% charged. I decided just to go run it in my front yard, run it down to about, 60%, 50-60% to store it. And the problem I ran into is that I was getting like thermal shutdowns within just like a minute or two of running it, and I noticed that when I let off the gas, it would like roll to a stop very quickly. You can tell there was like a lot of resistance in the transmission. Picked it up, spun the wheels, could feel something was right, so I shut it down and said, forget it, I'll take it apart and see if I can figure out what's going on. And that's why, of course, you see the transmission just kind of laying here and the car, its innards just kind of hanging out. I wanted to take it apart and just make sure that there wasn't something wrong, if there was a gear binding or something like that. So I thought I'd just take this opportunity just to show you guys real quick on how the 2-speed transmission works. It's actually kind of cool, and it's simple, and it's really kind of cool the way it works. Now, I tried to actually show you guys how it worked, but it turned out awful because my hands were all in the way. So I'll just try to explain it. So the spur gear sits on the end of that shaft. Spur gear is right there. That gear drives this gear shaft, and actually both of those two gears engage this 2-speed transmission at all times. It's actually kind of simple the way it works. It's sort of ingenious too. Now, if you look, you see that on either side of that little plate right there, I'm going to try to zoom in if I can, you see that you've got those little plastic nubs there and there. What happens is the servo that shifts the transmission is attached to this rod and moves that rod back and forth. That little metal piece is slid into that little metal slot right there, and what that does is that slides that piece on the shaft back and forth. And depending on which gear is engaged depends on whether you get low speed or high speed. And then the other gear that's not engaged just simply spins freely on the shaft because of course it's engaged with that gear at all time. So it's pretty cool on how simple it actually is, and it seems to work well. I haven't had any really trouble shifting in my limited running of the truck. So as I was putting it back together, I was constantly turning the output shaft just to make sure everything was still nice and smooth and didn't bind and all that good stuff. And as I got everything put back together and before I was putting the final screws in, I felt that the shaft would barely turn. It was like really rough. And after kind of backing some screws out, I realized that the problem is that screw right there. And that's the really long screw that fits into that part of the transmission case right there. I mean, if you put even just, if it gets anywhere even close to bottoming out, if you will, the transmission will bind. I'd leave about that much of a gap so the transmission would not bind. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting it back together. I just want to let you guys know that if anybody has one of these, there's something up about the way the gears are situated inside, or the length of that screw, or the mesh, or something that it really kind of messes with it. So I'm just kind of wondering if that screw got, I don't know, if something happened to it. Maybe that's where my issue was. Not saying it was a bad thing that I pulled everything apart, because I oiled the bearings and cleaned everything out and greased the gears and all that good stuff. But just wanted to let you guys know, in case anybody has one of these, to just kind of take a look out for that if your transmission feels like it is binding, check that screw.